Today's Tarkov patch has given the biggest shakeup to attachments that we have seen in years and years and years, so we're going to jump right into this one. Now we're going to spend most of our time in-game for this, but I just want to show you on the patch notes what they've said. So basically they changed the weapon attachments, muzzle devices, magazines, grips, and buttstocks to do various things, and this is the purpose of it. And we're going to spend most of our time actually in this app here, DB for Tarkov, because it just shows things in the easiest possible way. I've been trying to think about how I'm going to show the dramatic changes that have come to this game, and I think this is the best way, because DB for Tarkov, if you've not used it before, is a weapon builder and it's all up to date for this new patch already, so we can compare easily. So let's get started. We're going to look at the M4 and 5.56 to begin with. So a lot of this is about suppressors, mainly toning down suppressors and stopping people from using them all the time. So if we click on the muzzle attachment here, we can look at all of the combinations of various muzzle brakes. I'll take this little flag off, which means that it's only silent. I'm going to start at the beginning. So the new best in slot muzzle brake is the CRD, the Furfranz CRD. This thing is loud and gives you minus 12.5 recoil. Now the thing that I want to point out here is that you get minus 10.5 ergonomics from using it, and it's not a suppressor, so there's not really much point doing this. I don't think the recoil makes up for the fact that it isn't actually a suppressor, so you don't get the sound suppression, and you also get the muzzle flash that you normally get in Tarkov when you're using an unsuppressed weapon with one of these like multi-combo pieces. We're just going to update my old meta gun. This is no longer meta anymore at all, so we're going to change this. So we'll add this guy, the Furfranz CQB. And on top of that, we'll add this, the Furfranz CRD. Buy these from the trader and stick them on. And I've shoved a load of 5.5A1 in this thing, and you can see, as per usual, it's very difficult to see what is going on. This is the main reason why people use suppressors. So back to the drawing board on what we're going to use. And if we look down the list, the next one is this thing, the SPR brake, SPR collar plus AEM5. Now this is special. You can see this is red on DB for Tarkov, and that is because it is not compatible with this particular barrel. You have to use very certain barrels if you're going to use this one. You have to use one of these Centurion arms. It's Centurion arm 16 or 18, then you can apply this thing. We'll put the barrel in first just to make sure that we can actually use it. Just stick it any old thing here, and then we can use the AEM. So this is the best in slot that you can use that is suppressed with minus 12 recoil and minus 19 ergo. This only works on the M4 though, because it's the only one that can apply this particular barrel. So this doesn't work on any other 5.56 weapon. So the next best in slot for suppressed is the RC2. This used to be the SF3P combined with the RC2, but now as you can see, it is the War Comp. You go and edit our gun, you can see the old SF3P flash hider has minus 4% recoil on it, and the War Comp has got minus 5. So technically this one is slightly better. However, you probably don't need this precise amount of recoil and probably willing to give away some of it for some ergo. So we'll click only silent up here. We'll go and look at some other combinations, and you can see there's quite a few with minus 10 recoil, but some of them have got quite dramatically different ergonomics numbers. So if we look down, now we've got the Ultra 5, which is the Thunder Beast with minus 9.5. And we also have down here the Mini Monster, again now combined with the War Comp rather than the SF3P, with minus 9. You're hardly going to notice 1.5 recoil, and you get significantly more ergonomics. Minus 16.5 for this versus minus 9 for this guy, and the Ultra 5 you get minus 11. Now the one thing that I would notice about the difference between the Ultra 5 and the Mini Monster is that we've got this extra stat Evo Ergo. If you've been around my videos a lot, then you'll know Evo Ergo basically takes weight into account as well. So for the RC2, this is minus 24. For the Ultra 5, it is minus 16, which as you can see is quite a lot better than the ones around it. And for the Mini Monster, it is minus 16.6. So the Mini Monster and the Ultra 5 are both basically the same. These two, I think I can consider now our sort of the one that we're going to run most of the time. I think these are the meta suppressors because one recoil you're not going to miss, and it gives you significantly more ergonomics to compensate for it. Now, if you did want to go silent and you don't want to use that Furfranz CRD thing, the next best one is this. This is the Lantac Dragon for 5.56. This is nearly the same as the CRD, 1.5 recoil off, but you get a load of ergo back for it, and even more if you look at the Evo Ergo. So this one is probably the loud version if you want to use it. It's very close to the suppressed versions now, so there's not as much of a disadvantage in picking loud if you want to, but they're kind of the same in terms of recoil. So I feel like for 5.56, you're probably still better off going suppressed. If you want maximum ergonomics, you can go for something like the PSR plus the PSR Thread Protector, which is 7.5 recoil and no ergo penalty. There's not really much point to doing this because some of the others don't really have much ergo penalty on them at all, and I don't think it's worth missing out on all of this recoil just for the extra ergo bonus, but you can if you want to do something really specific. Next, we're going to look at 7.62. So let's go and have a look at the SR25. Now, something funny has happened here. I have a feeling that BSG have forgotten about the SR25 special suppressor. If you change over to the M110 gas block, you can then add on this thing, which is the Mark 11. And if you look, the recoil on this thing is significantly different to everything else at -18. Now, I will admit that having to use this gas block does mean that you miss out on 1.5 recoil points from not using the JP Enterprises Gas System 6, technically speaking. So this means this is 1.5 worse than it would look otherwise, but I expect this to be nerfed probably. So if you're checking this in a day or two, then this may well be not as good as it is right now. You can see the next best one is the BMD. This was actually the case previously as well. This is the 3-part BMD here. You've got the outer section, the Lantac Dragon on the inside, and then the BMD attachment itself, with -14 recoil and -5 ergo, which isn't too bad. But this is almost identical to the red brake these days, with -13 and -3, but the Evo ergo is a lot better because it's really light, because it's not made of 3 parts. So you may as well go for the Fortis red brake if you want to go loud. Now, if you do want to go quiet still, which you probably will, and you don't want to use the Mark 11, or you're not using the SR25, maybe using the G28 or something else like that, then the PRS QDC technically still is the best in slot. But like we saw before, the Ultra 5 really does stand out as being 1.5 recoil points worse than the PRS QDC, but the Evo ergo is so much better. These are all like -38, -36, -35, -41, and then the Ultra 5 sits in here at -20 because it's so light in comparison, and then they go back to like -40, -32, and even if you go all the way down to the bottom, there just aren't any that's similar. So I think that the Ultra 5 is probably the best kind of general use meta suppressor now, and you have even less choice in 7.62 than you do in 5.56, where at least you can use the mini monster. So next, let's go and have a look at the AK-12. This one's pretty quick because there's not that many parts for it. So the two that are best in slot are either the RRD 4C if you go loud, or the Waffle if you go quiet. The -26.5 ergo is quite a lot, but there's not that much that you can do about it. Some of the other ones now, the SRVV AK-74, very similar to the RRD 4C, so there's not a huge gap anymore. And if we look at the silence only, then the hybrid is probably the next best one. So the Waffle is still quite superior, and it's a lot better than the regular AK as well. So not much has changed here on the AK-12. Now, obviously, we could sit here and go through loads of different weapons, but those are kind of the main platforms that people use, so I'm going to leave that for now. Next, we're going to look at vertical foregrips. So vertical foregrips have changed significantly, as you can see. If we look at the list of foregrips themselves, these now range from -2.8% recoil all the way down to -0.4% recoil. So even something like the KAC vertical foregrip that we buy off Peacekeeper and is super duper cheap is now -1.5, which is quite interesting. And the one that used to be terrible, which was the RK2, has been brought up to being sensible. So it's -2.8 and +2 ergonomics, which is kind of weird. If we look at ergo itself, the best for this is 5.8 and the worst for this one is +1.8. So foregrips now always give an ergonomic bonus, which is quite interesting. This is quite a departure from what we had previously. And the ordering hasn't really changed, so the best in slot recoil is the same as it was before, RK2, RK1, RK1 canted, and the same with the ergo as well. We've got the Strike Industries Cobra, the SE5, and then down to the Fortis Shift and the Magpuls after that. But the one thing that I would point out, we'll have to swap to another handguard for this. We go to something that is M-LOK compatible, the M-LOK AFG vertical foregrips, which I was considering pretty much the bang for buck best use case in the first place, and now even better than they were before. These things are 7.8 Evo ergo, so including the weight of them, and they give you -2.1 recoil. If you go and look at the overall combination with the Magpul M-LOK 4.1 inch rail on, obviously this is including the handguard itself, so it's not the same as just looking at them directly. We're going to have to swap to a different weapon for this one because otherwise it's a bit confusing. If we look at Evo ergo on all of it overall, we'll look at the handguard because it's the only way to pull up the entire list. You can see that the AFG M-LOK is actually the best, even including the SI Cobra and the SE5, which we always kind of knew was the case, but now these ones have better recoil than their counterparts because the AFG M-LOK is supposedly middle of the road for ergonomics, but because it sits outside of the rail, it actually has slightly better recoil for that. So this is -7.1 recoil and beats the SE5 and the SI Cobra in terms of ergonomics as well, even though it's not strictly speaking on the stats screen like that, it is like this because of the weight. So AFG M-LOK is now probably the best grip in the game in my opinion. There's really no point losing all of this ergonomics to get a few points of vertical recoil negative. I just don't think it's really worth it. You know, given that the maximum now on this gun at least is -7.8 and the AFG M-LOK is giving -7.1, this is including the handguard, that is just not worth getting rid of the ergonomics. So you're pretty much going to use the AFG M-LOK everywhere you can, and if it's not an M-LOK handguard, then you're probably just going to use the SI Cobra or the SE5 or something like that. Another interesting thing is pistol grips also have recoil now, so this is new. If we order this by recoil, we can see that the Sniper Kit pistol grip has -1, the Aeronox, the Zenit RK3, and the Palm grips also have respective recoil reducing stats as well alongside their ergonomics. Now, if we order it by Evo Ergo, then the best grips are also the best for that. So this hasn't really changed, so the sniper kit grip is still the best here. And if we swap to the M4 and the AR-15 style platform, you can see again they range between minus 0.5 and all the way up to minus 1.1 for the PSG-1 style grip, which has been out of the meta for a long time, so maybe some people will be using this. But the Evo Ergo on this is very similar, same with the recoil, to the Skeletonized Style 2, to the Orion, to the Style 1. So all of these are pretty good now, and you'll probably just choose the cheapest. Like, you'll probably just choose the Skeletonized Style 1 because it's only 10k and gives you basically the same stats as the others, or you just pick whichever one you think looks the coolest. Now, when it comes to stocks, we've changed some stuff here as well. The stocks for the Western weapons, for the M4 and that kind of thing, look pretty similar, so there's been a little bit of a shake-up, but for the most part, the MOE stocks, combined with the MOE rubber butt pad, are still the best with the ARE, because the ARE is still the best buffer tube. So this gives you minus 25 recoil and a good lump of ergonomics. If you set this minimum to 14, you do have to lose quite a lot of recoil to get a significant advantage here. To get up to plus 19, you have to go down to minus 22 with the Viper. To get over 20, you have to go down to the RIP stock. And at the bottom, we have the usual guys, the M7A1 with minus 19.5 and minus 18 for the Viper. I mean, you could say it's only minus 6% recoil, so they are kind of more feasible than they were in the past. So it depends what you're going for. You can go for these ergo builds a little bit more easily, but I still think the MOEs are going to be the staple. Conversely, over on the eastern side, some of the best in slot stuff has been absolutely smashed. So if we look here at the regular stocks, and we've got the Zhukov here. This is the one that was the best. This now gives 23 recoil and 15 ergo. If we look at the combinations, we can get down to minus 27, and the ergonomics, we can get up to actually some crazy amounts like this one with plus 40, but the recoil's not very good on it. So if we look at the best bang for buck, it's now probably this, the PT AKM plus the PT1 plus the rubber butt pad. This gets you minus 27 recoil, which is really quite a lot, and plus 10 Evo Ergo. If I just set this to 10, so we can look at our comparisons. Here's the Zhukov with 4% less recoil, but 4 more actual ergonomics, which corresponds to about 7 Evo Ergo. And to get any higher than that, you have to go way down the list, so it's not really worth it. So the Zhukov is still kind of okay, but it's sort of middle of the road between ergonomics and recoil. I think most people are just going to pick the PT1 and the rubber butt pad, because this guy didn't really suffer. I think the biggest loser out of this patch is weapons that were already quite low on ergonomics and needed a bit of help, because these stocks really make you choose some hard choices between ergonomics and recoil, which kind of wasn't the case before for some of these guns, but I think the RD has come out of this relatively unscathed. Over on the AK-12, pretty much the same thing has happened here. So the AK Evo, which is the one that we always used to use, has again been kind of smashed. If we look at the stocks themselves, this is now minus 24 recoil and 15 ergo, but with the PT3, you can get 27 recoil and 11 ergo, which corresponds to 13 Evo Ergo. Again, if I put in this minimum filter, you can see we lose 3 ergo here, and we gain a little bit of Evo Ergo, but it's not really worth it probably on these particular guns. So the MOE, the PT3, and the PT1, if you can't use the PT3, are probably the best bet now for most builds going forwards. Now we're going to skip back into the game for a moment, because there has been a massive buff to certain particular weapons attachments, namely these drum magazines. So you can see the ergonomics on these is much lower than it was before, as in the penalty is much smaller, which is great for meta builds, but it means that these guns just don't get penalized anywhere near as much for it. This kind of offsets the suppressors, kind of nerfs, I guess, in some ways. I think this is designed to compensate for the decreases in ergonomics for things like the pistol grips, because the pistol grip and foregrip ergos are a lot lower than they were before. But this does mean that middle of the road budget builds are actually kind of worse than they were previously, because they weren't using a drum mag in the first place, and so they weren't having to offset it with high-end attachments or anything like that. Whereas these endgame builds using the 60 rounders have now been relatively buffed by the fact that these ergonomics penalties have been reduced by a significant amount. You can also see that the load unload speed modifier has been changed a lot. These used to be a lot higher, and I think the one that is most obvious is on the P90. The P90 is absolutely notorious for having a terrible reload speed in Tarkov, and the reload speed modifier has been changed from plus 75% down to plus 15%. So this is a dramatic change. The big mags are now much better in this game. So what does a meta M4 look like these days? Just as a good example, because this is the one that people usually use to kind of benchmark everything. So let's just start from the beginning. So at the start, we're going to use the upper receiver, which we used to use before, which is the AX-15. This is not the best for recoil, but it is the best for ergonomics. You get so much from it, so I think it's always worth using this guy. On the barrels, this is still kind of the same. BA Hansen, which is the long one, we should be using that. And the gas block is the low pro. This is still the same as well. SIA QD 14.5-inch handguard is the best there, and onto that we're going to attach one of these M-locks as we talked about before. From the pistol grips, it's really up to you. We could use the Orion. This is the one that I thought was probably best bang for buck and is cheap, and it's like 0.1 difference to the PSG grip, so we're going to use that. On the stocks, we're going to go ARE plus MOE plus butt pad. There's nothing hugely surprising about that. Then for the muzzle brake, we're going to either use the Thunder Beast or we're going to use the Mini Monster. It's up to you. If you use the Mini Monster, make sure you use the War Comp first. So you go War Comp and then Mini Monster after that. And then we're going to use this particular magazine, this guy here, the Mag 5. Now, the reason for this is if you look at these two, they've actually changed these to be exactly the same. So this one is actually even slightly better. So this has a unload speed modifier, which is worse than this one. This one is better on ergo, and it weighs very, very little compared to this. And so this guy is actually technically better in quite a significant way, actually, for an ergonomics perspective. So you should be using this Mag 60. And whatever charging handle you want, technically speaking, those Raptors are the best. So we're going to use any of those. And then you can put on the Defiance front and back like we used to. And then you can go ahead and put on whatever scope that you like. Geisley still gives you this plus half an ergo point for both pieces. And you can put a Voodoo inside of that. And this is going to get you a 68 ergonomics and 58 vertical recoil weapon. The best in slot that you can get if you push everything to its maximum puts you into overswing territory. That is 49 vertical recoil. So this is really, really amazing actually. So this is pretty much, it looks very similar to what we had before. We've just got some changes to suppressors, changes to the pistol grips. Those are the main things that have changed for the M4 in particular. And most of the other stuff stays kind of about the same. So the other changes were mainly around the speed of the menus. I will say I can feel it's kind of quicker. There are some lag still between that and this, which is the thing that annoyed me previously, but they've said that it's faster operating between different tabs now, which is good. And then in the settings, we now have a new option in here for DLSS presets. Previously in there, you could only get the old DLSS 4 presets, which was J and K. Now they've added L and M exposed as well, which is the new DLSS 4.5. Personally, I think I prefer J and K. J and K, for me, work a bit better inside. They give me a clearer picture, but outside, I think L and M do look better. You don't get any of the foliage smearing that you get with J and K. So try both, see what you think. Your mileage may vary. It sort of depends on your preferences on how it looks. But at least now it's in the game, which means you can easily swap back and forth without having to do something in the NVIDIA app or restart the entire game and reopen it every time you make a change. So this is good. Anyway, this is going to change a lot of the gun builds in the game, so I'm going to be having to go through all sorts of different things to figure out what it materially changes the most. So look out for that in the next few videos. Until then, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.